Hello, my name is Pam Swanson, and I am here with Jeff Swanson, founder of the Plan Bible and Jeff Swanson Ministries, and also Dr. Scott Young at drscottyoung.com. And we will be talking today about ForeTold 1 and 2, books 1 and 2, and we'll be talking about that right after this. All right, Jeff, can you tell me a little bit about your background and how you got started in Bible prophecy?
Yes, it's kind of been a passion, like Dr. Scott. We both got started all the way back in the 80s when my passion got...
Wasn't it in '82 though? I thought
Probably,
it
yes.
was.
Actually, it was. In 1982, I got my first New American Standard Ryrie Study Bible
Oh.
that had all of the prophecies outlined in it. Made it very, very easy to read, and so I started highlighting prophecies. Those of them yet to come in the future were in orange, and those that had already been fulfilled in red. And that was the start of it. And I think you got a hold of Hal Lindsey's book way back then.
Yeah, see, and I was kind of, sorry, I'm going to jump in, but, just with that too, because I think that was one of the cool things about Jeff and I is that both of us in '82, I'm 16, he's 18, and he's getting into it at the same time. And we talked about that later, that we were picking up these kinds of points of prophecy because in the past, I never read books because I had dyslexia. And so I didn't care about them, and I didn't care about what was the Bible was saying, even though I was a Christian. But that's the kind of thing that happened to me too.
It's compelling once you start getting into it. It really becomes, wow, this is a divine source, a divine origin behind these words. Aren't just something that was inked on a page. Now it's living history. And that's what was really compelling to me.
Very good. So you were interested ever since in Bible prophecy. That became a passion of yours, and you began to study for the
Began
rest.
to study it, and then somewhere in the 90s, I started listing out all the prophecies, going, what would this look like if I painted a picture of all of the future to come? What are all those prophecies? And was absolutely astonished to find 1,100 prophecies of the kingdom to come, the millennial reign, that 1,000 years.
Was that 1,100 prophecies in the New Testament and the Old Testament?
Majority of them in the Old Testament. The New Testament only mentions the 1,000-year reign about 6 times in Revelation chapter 20. There's other allusions through it, all through Paul's writings, but they're not really full verses of it. But a lot of the promises for God's chosen people are in there.
It's fascinating once you get started studying, and I know that led on to later be published as the Plan Bible. And while you were working on that all this time, Dr. Scott over here was studying prophecy and studying his ideas and the things that the Bible said, and had a passion, and the two of you came together.
Yeah, and I think for me, I started the same kind of time frame. Picked up a Hal Lindsey, Late Great Planet Earth, powerful book for that. I remember sitting by the doorstop, a really weird place to sit. I'm sitting by this doorstop and I'm flipping through the book, and I don't know why I'm reading it there, but I just was. And after that, I would pick up every single book. I didn't care if it was pre-trib, post-trib, amillennial. I didn't care what they were. If it was nonfiction, fiction, I would read everything. And by the time I spent so much money in books, I'd given most of them away after a while. But I just said I'm kind of unsatisfied because it wasn't answering enough of my questions. Like, you should actually go ahead and read what the Word says about it. And that's when I would study all the way through Daniel and Ezekiel and Zechariah and Malachi, and then jump over the New Testament. And only later did I really catch the fascination with how Matthew talks about the end time issues. And I think when Jeff and I got together, I was fascinated by this guy who had written, the Plan Bible. Don't want to say write the Plan Bible. He organized it And I always tell people this way, what Jeff did that I think is powerful for most people when you think about this is that the Plan Bible it's a chronological Bible. And I hear this all the time. Oh, I've read that. No, you haven't read this. You've never read anything that takes half verses. That part of it is talking about creation. Second Peter 3:3 talks about creation backed up with end time issues. Well, you can't put all that together in a chronological order without splitting it. So that verse has to pop in the beginning, has to pop at the end to do that. Whereas, Job is a very early book, but, Jeff has it in that order, but some of the stuff in Job actually is a creation conversation, right?
Yes.
And
indeed.
that was the powerful thing I loved about what you were doing with that.
And that was something that the Lord had put down as a directive. I'd been working on this for, almost 10, 15 years before he gave me the actual directive to publish the thing. And I thought, And as soon as he gave me that picture of one message, one word, all the Word of God as one story all the way through, my first thought is, even after working on it for 15 years, I thought that's impossible.
Yeah.
And I felt the Lord just kind of in my spirit tell me, with God, all things are possible. I thought, well, okay, if God is in this, then that's exactly where I want to be. And even as I started putting those things together, and just like you're saying, that those verses that span all of time, one thing I did not see until after I'd gotten started on the thing was something that I call a prophecy thread now. And I never saw hyperlinked prophecies, but the technology today actually gives us the ability to be in an ebook and actually see a prophecy declared, click on it, and jump forward either to where it's been fulfilled in the past or will be fulfilled in the future. So that's never been done before, and it was something I didn't see until after I'd actually taken the steps of obedience, and that's amazing how God does that with everything. I mean, that's the way the book was as well.
Right.
We really didn't know what we were getting into until we just started taking those steps of obedience. And I think the Lord just sort of really opened our eyes to clearer revelation and then made the picture clear, which you did a wonderful job with. I mean, you basically took the vision and said, okay, here's a great plot line. Here's the characters, took the development of those characters. And what was compelling to me going through as kind of being the editor for the theology side of it was, this is real. This is so believable that it's like you kind of get drawn into this story going, this could be me.
Right.
And then you realize, wow, this is what the Bible paints as a picture for that future, which the purpose of the thing is to get people to think, to wake up, to find that you don't want to find yourself in the tribulation period. So
When I think about this too, your role in his development of the ministry, I think is fascinating. What were you seeing when he would study? What would you talk about the time frame that he would study in the morning?
Yes, Jeff began doing the scripture study and putting scriptures in order. Actually, it started when we were first married, because I asked Jeff, I wonder what it would look like to see the Gospels all put in order, all the scriptures cut up and put in order.
Yeah.
And so before we got married, or on my first birthday we were together, he presented me with this gift. And I still have it.
Wow.
It's a folder with the little prongs, and it has all of the Gospels put in order for me. That was a gift.
Wow.
And that was his first official printed, typed little thing. And so he would...
What a foray into your
Yeah,
birthday,
I
present
know.
with that stuff.
I know.
Yeah.
Who knew that would lead to this? But many, many years, Jeff would wake up early in the morning and work in his office, 3 in the morning till go to work, and just take section by section of the Bible and put it in order, and just for his own personal desire of seeing God's Word in order. Jeff's always loved the Lord, loved the Scripture more than life itself, I think, and so would study, put it together, and eventually over 20 years or so of working, he came up and said, it's time to publish. The Lord said it's time to publish. And so we've been on that journey ever since, and it's been exciting. It's taken us places that we never expected, but that's the way the steps of the Lord work. You just take one step at a time, and part of that order was bringing Scott into our lives, not just as a partner in the book, but also as a very good friend. Our families are have deep friendships. We love the Lord and we worship together. And I like that you shared that the Lord had you put it together as a story. That's what you said as a plan. And then it got me thinking, well, Scott's a storyteller. Jesus told stories.
Huh.
And so much of concepts in Scripture can be understood best in a story. And for me, the most exciting thing about this book is it takes how the Lord has spoken about prophecy, and he spattered it all over the Bible. So a student has to search for it.
Yeah.
But it's taken it all and it's painted a picture. So now I can visualize it and actually see things I never could have seen without them all put together, so I could put a picture together. And the Lord needed the two of you. He knew it was a match. We're living stones, and he partnered the two of you. And it just came to being. And I don't know if... I know Jeff's side, he would talk about a book, but tell me your side of the story and how this vision came to you, or what made you excited about this.
I think part of it was Jeff would come over for football games. And we're both Denver Bronco fans, kind of grew up in the Colorado-ish area over time frame, and even Pam's been around that place too, and so was Wendy. And so, we would come over, he'd come over, I think it was in 2011 season, when the Broncos weren't any good.
They were having a rough year.
So we would now I have DirecTV, and you can pause the game, and we would start, spitting out scripture. But I think one of the coolest parts about this that most people don't do, and I really recommend this for at home, but is instead of arguing Billy Joe's statement and Jimmy Bob's statement over here, we didn't have to say authority versus authority. What I would do, and then what he would do, is say, yeah, but this scripture says this. Well, yeah, but that scripture says this. And so what it became is that you would say in scripture it says that iron sharpening iron, but it was much deeper than that. What it was doing is finding the places of agreement.
Yeah.
And I see the scriptures. Most people who are atheists or agnostics or just don't careists, those people that don't see that the Bible is this full integrated effect. They see it as 66 books, 40 authors with maybe they're talking to one another, maybe they have some similar meeting, they're just talking about God, but did they really have something coming together? And what I had studied end time stuff, but I felt like at that time frame I was struggling. The business was dying. My hearing solution centers was dying. We were on the edge of bankruptcy, which anyone who's been in ministry, anyone who's been in a business knows it like the back of their hand, right? If you're not in that place of struggle, then I just say you probably haven't lived yet. But so what I thought was powerful is that I was fighting through that. And, I count three people. There's a guy named Chris, a guy named Will, and Jeff. And when I knew I needed to get deep in the Lord because everything was just going through a vacuum cleaner around me. And just like, when you have a vacuum cleaner and you're just sucking up everything, you're thinking, I just sucked up a wedding ring, kind of thing. If as you did that, you sucked up jewels, and that was where I was struggling with. So at that time frame, Jeff sort of knew this. I always say it this way: if I was going 100-foot depth of the Lord before, Jeff was already at the 1,100-foot depth. And in 2010 and 11, I was pushing down into that 600-700 foot depth, because what I wanted to do is go after what the Word said.
Now, this is something I think every viewer sitting out there can identify with, because right now we're sitting here filming this. The COVID virus has been going on for almost about 2 months, And a lot of people are experiencing what you've experienced, what I've experienced, complete uncertainty as to what the future holds. And one thing that becomes obvious when you're going through it is, I'm sure you can identify this, what do you put your trust in?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, suddenly, all of those things that you thought were props and were holding me up and security blankets, they're all gone.
Right.
And you find yourself clinging to God, clinging onto the Word of God, and that's when you find who He really is.
And that's not the evil.
No, nothing
No,
wrong
that's
with
not
that at
the
all.
evil. I mean, that's
We can count it as a joy
It
going
is a
through
joy.
a trial.
It is the joy. I mean, we don't see. I mean, we don't have to see those trials as like this persecution kind of thing. Yeah, they have some persecution in there, but it says, "For the joy set before Him, He endures the cross." Every time I've looked at joy, I see this trail of persecution. But persecution doesn't lead to righteousness. It's a conversation we have all the time. Persecution doesn't lead you to a good spanking that should come around, right? It's not a spanking so that you'll get better. It is a point of coming to a trust place.
Absolutely. And then when we put our trust in Him, we're basically opening our heart up and saying, okay, God, you have to come through. Your Word tells me that you'll take care of me, and you will. Now I'm relying on that. And that's when He comes through. And we both have stories time after time of how God has come through with everything.
And I think during those football games, I was this because I had read end time stuff, because I had read all of these fictional, non-fictional things that were, it bothered me because it felt like this argument. Does that make sense? I mean,
yeah. What I like to say is the problem with people today is they're trying to fight to be right.
Yeah.
Instead of being on a quest for truth. And when you're on a quest for truth, then you're not pushing anyone else down.
Right.
You are saying, well, is there an element of truth there or isn't there? And then you go to the scripture and find out what is true.
Boy, if that isn't being shown in our world right now,
Yeah.
not a quest for truth, what we're seeing on media and social media is just a
Right.
fight to be right.
And I even one of my favorite authors that is Mark Hitchcock, and he writes this book called The End. And Mark Hitchcock's a great prophecy teacher, so he really recommend that people look at that. But one of the things that he actually made a comment with in one of his sections on The End is he says, well, there are all these evidences for a pre-tribulation rapture. And then he brings up the evidences for a post-tribulation rapture. And he does a beautiful job at explaining it and more. I mean, obviously you could write on thousands and thousands of pages on both sides of this argument, right? And then he says that there's more evidence toward the pre-tribulation rapture. Now, what I don't want to beat him up about is not going in that direction. We tend to think, as a world, we tend to think of these as court cases. So Jeff steals the pack of gum. There's 5 pieces of evidence against you and 4 pieces of evidence for you doing that job. Therefore, I picked the 5, and those are strong enough to convict you, right?
It's the way a court system works.
And we get that. But yet the Word of God says in 2 Timothy 3:16 that all Scripture is God-breathed.
Amen.
So if all Scripture is God-breathed, now see, that's what I was coming to.
Yeah.
And Jeff was bugging the snot out of me because he would say a yeah, but. Now, here's the part of the equation. If you're writing down the equation and you see a point of the equation, now Pam is a homeschool mom. She has taught all of the kids through math that Jeff and I couldn't possibly do. Now, he knows math better than I do as an accountant, right? But she's had to teach it, break it down to the tiniest levels. And the problem is that when kids see that, they miss a piece of the equation, right? On big long equations. And I was there in 2010, 11, 12, 13, and fighting through those equations. And we would spend hours and hours ad infinitum to you. and ad infinitum to my wife, right? About these crazy conversations that very few people would ever do, because most people would walk away mad as a hornet, right?
Right.
When you were going through a real hard, difficult time, you spoke about in your business and at your time, that the Lord had you dig in and brought Jeff, and you worked through the scriptures about prophecy.
Right.
And I remember with Jeff and the difficult times that we went through, both business, starting ministry, publishing in the Pan Bible, Jeff would say over and over again, it was the Lord taking him back to the scriptures about the hope set before us. He would always think towards the future.
Yeah.
The Lord would show him, it's hard now, but look at all the good that's coming. And that was Jesus's point, the hope before him. I find it interesting, in your low point, it wasn't the creation at that time so much you were
Right.
studying, but it was the prophecy, and you were digging towards the future. And here's birth, this beautiful, hope-filled story, which is where I want to kind of take us to next, because what's so excited about this book series to me is that it is about and based in the millennial reign. We have a lot of prophecy things on the tribulation period, which is true. There's a period of tribulation coming, but that part wasn't really the joy that Jesus was talking about. There are so many verses, and maybe Jeff can share, on this period called the millennial reign. And that's why I like this book, because it speaks about what it looks like in that period, and then takes a person telling a story about flashbacks. So maybe you guys can go from there, maybe starting with Jeff, about where it started with the millennial reign, and then how Scott brought the story so
Yeah, because we
beautifully.
had to have a starting place.
Yes.
I don't care what you do, and I've written 11 books, these are part of it, but, you always have to, most people look at a blank page
Yeah.
and they get stuck.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, they just see this blank page and they see nothing else.
Yeah.
And that's why most people can't write, because of that.
Yeah.
But the part that, even though we had our characters, and there's a whole analysis that I could talk about, but as we go through that part, we still had to have a starting place. And I think the powerful one that I really needed to have from you is not just the when, which happened to be deep in the end of the millennial reign,
300 years in.
but I needed to have, where are we gonna be at? Not just where our character Nathan was, but where was he going through? So why did you pick that particular placement?
This was something that the Lord put on my heart for many, many years. It was kind of brewing in my spirit for a long time. As I was going through and as I was publishing the Plan Bible, I just kept having this vision come out of me of, Dr. Tim LaHaye wrote the Left Behind series. It was very, very successful. He kind of broke new ground on this new genre, if you will, of prophecy fiction. But his take on it was almost shock and awe.
Yeah.
It's, by the way, here, it's bam, it's right in your face, here's fear. My thought, and what was on my heart, is that's been done.
Yeah.
But what about the joy that you had mentioned that Jesus saw, that was set before him, that gave him the ability to endure the cross? What did that look like? What about these 1,100 verses of prophecy? It paints quite a picture when you put all these pieces together, and you can actually mold together a vision. And so the thought process that I had is, wouldn't it be cool to go 300 years into the future and paint that picture that Hollywood does such an awful job with?
That's true.
I mean, it's always the destruction of the planet,
Right. Post-apocalyptic kind of movies, yeah.
The end of the world, we got to find someplace new to live. It's just anarchy and chaos, which is completely the opposite of what the Bible teaches, which is nothing but peace, nothing but joy, nothing but prosperity for everyone, and longevity of life. What does that look like with the perfect ruler, Jesus Christ himself, ruling and reigning, and the perfect government, if you will, all of his saints ruling the planet? What does that look like? It paints quite a picture. And so to jump forward into the future and just dive into a whole new hope-filled circumstance. It just brightens and lifts people out of their current situation.
So why did you pick though? Because I mean, most people understand that there are 7 parts of the Jewish feasts. Okay, and then we have kind of realized through a lot of good study of the first 4 hit at Jesus' first coming, and the last 3 are a second coming conversation. Now, I struggled with Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, where they might be placed. This was some of the things that, I mean, he had to beat on me and I was okay with that. By the way, there's nothing wrong with going after one another in a respectful kind of way, because it really beats down the things that don't need to be there. That's First Corinthians 3:13, where we build a foundation, and whatever we have left is that precious stones and jewels. But you picked a really kind of oblong kind of passage point of the Feast of Tabernacles. So why?
Because it's found inside a prophecy that it actually states that they will be observing the Feast of Tabernacles all through the Millennial Reign.
Right.
And most people think, well, Jesus fulfilled the law, so why would they have to do that anymore? True. As Christians, we understand that.
Yeah.
But for God's chosen people, the Jews, who will actually be going through the tribulation period and be saved out of the tribulation, they will be there, but they will not have 2,000 years of knowing what grace is all about.
Right.
And so they will actually be fulfilling these festivals as they learn what true grace is and the mercy of God. And Jesus will be molding us all into basically one kingdom. And so because of that, it's scripturally accurate that they will be observing tabernacles. So what better of a place to give a testimony?
Right.
And the whole idea of our main character, Nathan, is giving a testimony to the next generations and encouraging them with his testimony that they too can run their race all the way to completion.
I remember having a kind of an ongoing conversation / argument with a guy who was just a very heavy post-trib response. And this went over for weeks and weeks and weeks on a IM with Facebook. And when he was trying to support his post-tribulation rapture, or we would call it a pre-wrath and more modern positional points. I kept asking him this one thing: if the rapture of the church, which is what he was saying, would happen at the very last couple days, whatever point in time you want to call it, 30 days, 10 days, how does anyone be saved into the millennial reign? And not one of them can answer that question. They get, I don't know. And I struggle right there, right? And what happens that I think that is powerful, what Jeff was kind of postulating back and forth to me, is that we see there are the nations that are in Zechariah 14:16 through 19, as you're talking about here. They're at the Feast of Tabernacles. They're talking about a story. It's like a whole bunch of guys sitting there going, you know what, this is what happened to me, but they're going to have kids. Now, we have the remnant, which is the Jews, and we have the sheep nations that are underneath in this way. So that the whole order will flip in that millennial time frame. But what the genius of this point was to say, you know what, the people who don't know about it are the kids and the grandkids and the grandkids, and so we have to have that point in time that Jesus has to be known about, even though he's sitting right over there on the throne, because we had to have a salvation part.
Yeah.
And I think that was the powerful part. But those people that first go into the millennial reign, they definitely are believers at the point when they walk into the millennial reign.
And this is very, very important because we have an audience today that has very little understanding of the millennial reign,
Yeah.
is that our main character, Nathan, gives his testimony, and that's why the subtitle is Survivor Stories of the Prophetic End of the Age. And so now what we have is a character that's in a world that we really aren't familiar with. But then as he reflects back and gives his testimony, all of a sudden becomes very, very real. Especially for you and I from Colorado, because that's where the setting is.
Right.
Is we know all these places, and we could picture ourselves very easily in any of these situations.
Yeah.
And it becomes very, very real as to what the prophecies hold in the future and why you don't want to be in the tribulation period.
Right.
Because it really paints a very clear picture of a lot of scripture that's very sobering.
So let me ask you a question though too. So you don't teach it. You watch on that back end, and and you've studied it just as well as a lot of other people have ever done. But why is prophecy important? Why in the world should we give a rip about it?
Oh boy, I was interested in prophecy before I met Jeff, and then afterwards I read a book about prophecy and it intrigued me, but I didn't have enough teaching on it at the time and was able to help me to move forward with it, because it isn't easy to find prophecy teachers. But I can tell you this, once I began to really study and begin to follow through some of the classes that Jeff would teach, or some of listening in conversations Jeff and Scott would teach and talk about, I can honestly say that it has made a world of difference in my outlook, in the way that I live my life, and even in the way that I understand the rest of Scripture. Because Jeff says this, and I have come to believe this, that as you study the Word, all of it is a fit of a puzzle, and you understand one piece better when you understand the rest. So when I began to study prophecy, I began to understand creation better, and I began to understand the middle of the Bible better. And I would start saying, oh, I see this is a reflection of that. Or I see this as a picture of that. And quite frankly, the whole Bible in and of itself became more living, like a living thing, versus, wow, I believe these are facts in the Bible, but I really don't see how it all makes sense to me.
Right.
And so I can honestly say that this millennial reign in this book, the understanding of the millennial reign and the true picture that it gave me, even though I had read the Bible verses, but the way that both of these men have woven the story, Jeff from the sort of the chronological aspects, and then Scott from the character development. As a woman, and all of us like to go into the person and follow a person. It's like, oh, the person is going through all the situations you read about, and it's something that changes from reading facts, because you can kind of sort of distance yourself from it, to walking through it with them. It just brought it all together for me. So these books, I think, can be life-changing, especially if you're trying to help your children understand. The days today are challenging. A lot of people are going through hard things right now. The world is beginning to shake. And people are beginning to say, oh, it's looking like tribulation-type things. What a better time to share a book like this with people.
Amen to that.
What a better time to say yes. But Jesus had how much more to say about past that, and this is what we look to. And so that's sort of my perspective of what it did for me with Bible study. So I know that you both had vision and hopes of what this book might present to people. What was yours when you began to sit down and see the characters?
I guess I think it was there's in every story. Okay, I'm the fiction guy. Jeff's is not. That's not his bailiwick. That's okay. I mean, everyone has something that they're kind of do.
You even gave me a book about 300 pages long and said, "Here, you need to read this. Here's how you write a novel." And I had to hear from God to read that.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
I did read it.
Yeah, he choked it down, and unfortunately that happens to that kind of stuff. But I remember when it kind of piled up to near that end, when you were really thinking about approaching me on this thing. We had actually taken a little bitty trip, well, wasn't little bitty, but all the way down to Orlando, Florida from Tulsa.
Right.
And he's getting sick as a dog in the car and, struggling through this. He's gonna maybe teach on the 3 rapture things.
I was the alternative
Yeah.
speaker if somebody didn't show
The
at
backup of
prophecy
the backup
conference.
quarterback kind of thing, and the third stringer that might show up and do that kind of
But
thing.
I had heard from God that I knew I was going to speak. You had heard from God that you knew you were supposed to take me there.
Right.
Which, if both of us had not heard, I wouldn't have gone.
No, and I wouldn't have caught this other side. So I kind of was just like, hey, just go sit down and I'll, he's feeling worse and worse, and I'll run the table, and we'll sell the books in different ways than you'd ever done that before. And I'm like, that's fine, just let me go. And what was fascinating is we'd already had that long level of battering about the word and what it was trying to say. But where I started seeing, so it's fascinating. You go to a prophecy conference, and I've been to a few of them, but I hadn't been like where he's sitting on the other side of the table in that way. And I'd started to come to a real strong understanding of what I really had to turn everything over. I think that's. I just want to back up to 1 second. Most people have a strong feeling about, well, are you a post-tribber? Okay, then I can like you, right? I mean, or you're.
They want to put you in a box.
Want to box me up, and I'm like, I'm not Kentucky Fried Chicken. Okay, so
Yeah.
so let's open the box and see what the Word wants to say, what it is, right? Because I always go back to this one point. To kind of wrap a bow on that one conversation. So let me say it this way: if the Word presents a point, and the Word presents a opposite viewpoint that sits on the other balance of the fence, what people tend to do, and we see this with free will and predestination. I mean, they want to that's fighting words, right? We want to split churches over this stuff. And God is grieved because he said, listen, by the way, if I can present this, and I can present this from the Word, and all Scripture is God breathed, guess what we have to come with? They're both right. Now, this messed me up. And it was messing me up as we went
In a
down
good
to that
way.
prophecy
Yeah.
conference, right? And I'm down there, and and I remember on the way back, he's asleep. He doesn't even wake up for 13 hours on the way home.
It was nonstop.
Yeah, he just
it was
snoring away.
Speaking and
He was
selling
gone,
and
right.
talking.
But what's fascinating is people at this prophecy conferences, we'll go backwards. So he's at the prophecy conferences. He's sitting in the back. I don't even know if he's listening, right? And someone would say some obscure reference. Now, I was pretty darn good at the time. I thought, I can handle this. I get 70, 80% of the people that ask a question, I can deal with that. But what hit me is some guy would say some obscure reference, and Jeff would have the scripture verse right there. And I know you know this because he's done it a billion times to you. And I'm like, what is that? And he had those reference points. And I think that was that crux of the story. Now we're getting into the reality of what can we do with this. But I really was fascinated because we were at this conference, and it was very much a pre-trib viewpoint. But there were a few post-tribbers, and even a couple mid-tribbers, weren't there, in that one?
Yeah.
And so you had some tension in the air. It's like a Pittsburgh Steelers versus Denver Bronco fans, and they're gonna fight, kind of thing. And so I'm sitting there, and I've got the iPhone up, and Pam and Wendy are back in Tulsa. Oh, come on, God! And he's gonna go in. Nothing's happening, right? And I mean, so I thought there's no prep for him, and 400 people show up in the room, and I'm thinking, okay, as soon as he starts speaking, they're gonna go, loop out the back door, and now he can't see anything because
Yeah.
the lights are hitting him, so he can't see anything. So I'm just, please God, just kind of get through it. So what happened is a fascinating thing. 3 people, I think, I counted, walked out the back
Yeah,
door.
they were all together.
And yet, and they could have gone to the bathroom, so I don't know what they did, but 3 people out of 400 is a
Yeah.
great percentage,
Yeah.
right? That's an awesome percent.
Well, and the rest of the story is this was an 8 o'clock meeting.
Yeah.
And at dinner, they announced the main speaker wouldn't be there.
Yeah.
And then they never said anything
They didn't
else.
say who.
It's like they just left it as he's not going to be there. So we're thinking nobody's going to show up in this
But the
breakout session.
whole, I mean, I've been to some of the other ones, and they might have had 30, 40, 50 people, but 400 people sit in this big thing. So this was a God thing. And so he started pitching this point about the viewpoints of a pre-trib, a post-trib, and a mid-trib. Instead of this, knockdown, drag-out argument, what happened is this peace. I can feel it. Now, I don't know if you felt it, but even from our conversation, but it was like, I could feel it, the Hebrews 10:25, don't let us not meet with one another, or we've done this in this COVID time frame, but you could feel it all the way through here. There was this peace, and I feel like it answers a question.
Yep.
And he's not even here, and I'm out there at the table waiting for anything to happen, and everyone's going, "Oh, this really helped me. I've been so scared." And there was fear that was palpable at this thing. I mean, people were freaking out.
Yeah.
Tell me what I need to buy so I know what to do.
Yeah, that was the thing that at my first prophecy conference, also sitting down on the backside of the table, is I thought my whole purpose, my whole heart, the book itself is all about faith, hope, and love, not fear and get it straight or burn.
Exactly.
That's not the way prophecy should be taught at all. And, we both would see these people with just terror in their faces coming to the table going, I just came out of this meeting and I am scared. What do I do? And there should be nothing fearful. As a matter of fact, Paul said, encourage one another with these words. And he's talking about the rapture. He didn't say scare the snot out of everybody so that they get right. And that has nothing to do with it. We just need to know the character of God and how loving he is and how merciful he is. Obviously, he sent his only son so that we could have a relationship with him forever. Well, that same reflection is found also in the end of our race. We've talked about why post-trib becomes problematic. Well, the very first problematic is the fact that it says to Daniel, there's 70 weeks for your people.
Which are who? The
Jews.
The Jews, the remnant, yeah.
And
So
if the church is there, then we don't need 144,000.
what do we do with them?
They don't, but they happen to be Jewish. So it's for your people. And so that clock stopped when Messiah died. It will start again as soon as the church is raptured. And that's the key. But people will say, yeah, but what about these verses for other raptures? And I say, you know what? You're absolutely correct.
Dead on. And I think what I want, to kind of go back a little to your question too, is to say, what I started seeing is I'm doing the character analysis. So what I would do, my very first book, I had this Nazi officer, and he's guilty. Everyone is coming up to the table. They're Jewish prisoners, or they're political prisoners. I'm just trying to figure out which line you go to. There's no guilty until proven innocent. There's no innocent until proven guilty. There's always guilty. And I was trying to figure out how to reconcile this. They're going to make an argument. How do we do this? And the answer always comes in by knowing your character. Okay, you know the setting, you know the two characters, and then you let the Holy Spirit in the story, let the Holy Spirit reconcile it. Because if you know your characters and you let them you play out, it's like having 2 kids, which you had 3 kids, and you saw the interaction, you'd see, like, okay, they're going to fight, and then you go, wait a second, they didn't. Well, that was weird. But if you were, inside of understanding what they were going to do, you could kind of get a predictive point to that. And I think that's one of the things that came out when we looked at this. But what I started seeing that, Jeff, we were building on each other. It was like this, pyramidal point. And he was bringing in the theology of melding together all these verses that felt like they were boxing gloves, right? And this fight that I kind of said, oh my gosh, now I can have this verse and not throw it out, because if it says in Revelation 22. If you want to pitch out the verses, fine. I'm going to pitch you out of the book. If you want to change them, then I'm going to add to you, or you want to add to something. I'm going to add to you the plagues that are written within it.
Right.
That bothers me.
Yeah, and that's where one of the great challenges of my directive was by God was to put His Word in chronological order,
Right.
for past, present, and future. So I can't just throw some verses out because they don't fit somewhere in my theology or chronology.
So you have to pitch you out before you pitch
exactly
pitch the Bible
and
out, right?
I have the fear of the Lord that know that at my judgment, I'm going to be judged for every word and every way that every verse is put in there.
And as a teacher, you're going to be double judged.
Absolutely. And I have that fear, that respect, that honor. So the way that the Plan Bible was actually put together was to take 5 different witnesses that have all produced prophecy Bibles. I looked at each one of theirs, and I took where 2 or 3 were in agreement, and then I placed each one of those verses. And what's surprising is the majority also came to the same conclusion on the placement of all those verses.
Right.
What they called them might not be the same thing, but they put the verses in the same place. And it's like, well, wait a minute. Okay, well, we'll call that a gathering, but we won't call that a rapture. No.
Right.
Well, it goes to heaven. Yeah, they're gathered to heaven, but we're not going to say they got
Revelation
raptured.
7:9. Right.
Exactly. And then you've got, Matthew 20. Or Matthew 24, 30, and 31. You've got the glorious appearance, but then now 31 talks about how they're all taken to heaven. Well, now we got another gathering, but we're not going to call that a rapture.
Right.
And so it becomes very, very clear that now I can say, well, the rapture of the church is pre-trib. Whatever you want to call that second thing at mid-trib in Revelation 7, 9, and also Revelation 14, 1 through 5, where the 144,000 are all taken to heaven, seen in heaven. There's no doubt where they are, and it says in Revelation 7:14 that they were actually taken out of the Great Tribulation.
Right.
So
And
there's
not
no
the
doubts.
martyrs in that way, because that's what some people want to say.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. Because it absolutely says all of them are taken up in a vast multitude, but it doesn't say that they were martyred. The martyrs are actually found in Revelation chapter 20, and they are actually resurrected at a very special time after Jesus has returned, after he sets up the thrones, and judgment is about to take place for those people who have made it through the tribulation period. Now the martyrs are resurrected, and you know what? They are witnesses. They are witnesses to their murderers, who will now stand trial for what they've done.
And that's a martyria. That's actually in John 19:36, 35, 36, 37, where you have, he's talking about, John is talking about the truth and the testifying. Well, that is actually the basis of in the word in the Greek, it's martyeo, which is a type of witness, and you're going to put your life on the line to do that. Well, we have the martyrs that will do that, which is that last half a group of people. And one of the things that I started seeing that we started building upon here is these groups of people. God was talking all the way through the scriptures. And most Jewish theologians that are just looking at the Torah, they would see onion layers, a peel back, and you'd see points of it. But it was consistent all the way from top to bottom. Now, frankly, no one's ever written anything that could keep consistent, but have these depth of layers that are just crazy. And that's why the Bible is so fascinating. While we can be stuck in a verse, and I know Jeff and I both have been stuck in verses for months, and we, we'll just argue about it. But one of the most powerful ones, and you just brought this up, that I think is a very difficult one to converse, is we're in Revelation 7. In Revelation 7, we have the introduction of these 144,000. Now, I always say to people, okay, if the bride is here, we're the bride of Christ, Ephesians 5. And we're here, sitting over here. Why do we need the 144,000, which is a Jeff conversation? That's what he will bring up all the time, right? Why do you have this when you have this? Well, they're going to talk to the Jews. No, that's a longer conversation. That happens later on. We know that from Revelation 6. But so how do you have these two? And here's the thing. The bride is gone when the Jews, the 144,000 Jewish young men who've never had sex with a woman, have their introduction, Revelation 14, right? So one of the things that I thought was also really powerful is there's two ways to leave the planet. You either leave the planet by death, or you leave the planet through a rapture event like Enoch and Elijah do. They're here, whoop, they're gone. They're here, whoop, gone. And in Revelation 7, we have the 144,000 that are sealed of God on their forehead. They cannot be harmed. Well, guess what? I just took away the death. Therefore, we have a possibility of, they have to go too.
Right. And it says they're all found in heaven, worshiping God together.
Right.
And that's
With a whole bunch of nations and other peoples, so it's not just them. So there are some
all
more things
those
to that.
people they've converted all the way
Correct.
through.
Yeah.
Well, I like what I'm listening. I just enjoy, and I always have enjoyed listening to these men visit back and forth, and I always learn every time I sit and listen. And what I'm kind of listening to and hearing kind of a thread right now is the Lord speaking to Jeff, and the importance of having everything in every scripture is God-breathed and useful, and having a place. And finding that place brings peace. It brings peace to the hearer. It brings to the individual, which brings peace to the body, to the corporate. Lord is looking for peace. He prayed for peace.
Amen.
And Scott himself is sitting in the room when some of these points of contention or misunderstanding within the body, he felt that.
Yeah.
But yet, when Jeff began to explain it, what happened in the room? Peace
Yeah.
was pervaded. It's, in the Lord, we know the Lord is the Prince of Peace. The peace, Satan has no peace. So Jesus is there when there's peace and unity. And that's his desire, to bring peace and unity and understanding. And you may be thinking, as I was thinking, this book is, its setting is in the Millennial Reign. But you hear these gentlemen speaking a lot about the time of the 7-year tribulation. And that's really the beautiful part of this story, is because it's written from the people and the perspective who are in that peaceful reign of Jesus, where there's nothing but peace. They can really look back and tell the story of the tribulation and see God's grace through it. They see the tribulation and they help you put all the pieces together.
Right.
So as you're reading the story, inside you're finding peace because it makes sense, because you're like, oh, I see how that works now. I see that I read it in the Bible, and I see this beautiful story written about this character who you fall in love with and his family, that Scott has woven this story about him flashing back and telling his testimony. And you realize that God works all things for good, and he has purposes for all these seasons and the tribulation, and it can be a hope-filled read about what's coming, and like they're speaking tribulation, help you understand it. But it's not from the perspective of me looking forward being scared.
Right.
It's from the perspective of really where God lives. God lives out here in the future. He sees it. That's where he was watching it through. And so you have a bit of perspective from a Jesus perspective, and from him ruling, and from people. So as you're hearing all of this talk, and you may be wondering about, these things I want to know more about, how these things fit, this book will help you. Even though it's written in the Millennial Reign, it helps you fit all those pieces together. And I don't know if each of you had thought that through, or if that's the way the Lord unfolded
I think
it
so.
in you.
No, I got to tell you a funny story. Sorry. So Jeff was like, "Well, I want to do a book about the Millennial Reign," and I kind of, no, he's not a fiction guy, and I was like, "Yeah,
No.
but where's the conflict?"
Yeah.
I don't know. Do you have to have one? And that was his statement. You know, he's
Tension here.
he's an accountant. Okay, accountants don't need conflict. Okay, I was just talking to my accountant on an issue with the
They don't,
issue.
yeah.
He wants resolve, right? And so you just care about resolve. That's how you think.
Yep.
And that's actually, you plug in this, will resolve. Plug in this, resolve. But what one of the hard parts about writing fiction is to not give everything away too fast, right? And so that was some of the stuff you struggled through with that. You want to give it away too fast because the reader's got to be surprised, surprised.
But if we start at the end,
Yeah.
then where's the surprise?
Yeah,
But
and that's the
that's
struggle, and I
so
think
good.
that's what the beauty was, is we do start at the end of the story, but we have to talk about the testifiers thing. And so instead of humiliation, because Nathan's gonna go back in time and talk into the tribulation instead of humiliation, like, you idiot. Why didn't you know better? What God does is, I think the power of the Bible is that God actually has some of the worst characters in the history of the world. I would personally argue that King David, actually was a murderer, that he conspired to murder, and that he also raped Bathsheba, and that he was and there's so many things. He broke up a marriage and everything else, and yet he was a man after God's own heart. So we're talking about, all of sin have fallen short of the glory of God, and yet we see inside the story to reveal him,
Yep.
Jesus, not the Scott, the David, the Jeff in the story, right? And I think that's what we wanted to give you, as that kind of viewpoint of that view of that story. So, because it's real world. When we see stories that are too pie in the sky, and we don't really have that connection there, we lose.
Right. And this is something I remember telling a story that I remember you saying is that, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but you had a song of a similar thing that you'd actually written before we ever met.
The Promised Plan. Yeah.
Starting in the Millennial Reign, looking
Really?
back. And so it's like, I remember you came back to me and said, the Millennial took a little bit of work, but once I got into this testimony, you just said
it flowed. It was
it just came out.
one of the things
you had to have that preparation in
and
your
I
heart
did,
long
and
before I ever
did,
talked
but I
to you.
think what Jeff did, those first 9 chapters, you're going to get into seeing some cool things, and that was much of the vision that Jeff was having in the first book of book 1, and that's where he spent a ton of effort. I mean, he was like picking out all those little things to and want to knock them together. It's like those 8,000. I don't know if they do this, but an 8,000 piece puzzle. I mean, and that's really what it was, is that huge puzzle. And I'm looking at going, let's just get it together, because I want to get in chapter 10.
Let's get moving.
And let's get moving. And yet we need to spend time. Sometimes you got to slow down and let the accountant work. The accountant mind work to click in the pieces of the puzzle. And I think that's always, that conflict isn't a bad thing. Conflict actually helps you grow, right? I mean, when you were homeschooling, you didn't, like everyone, walk home and they all saying kumbaya. You would come home and go, oh my gosh, separate kids and, kind of thing, kids and mom, and go to your own corner, because there's a struggle at times. That's okay. And I think that's the power in that book. And that was the whole point that we wanted to see, is that the conflict we have to let it grow and fester, so that people can find themselves there.
And at the same time paint the picture that Jeff was, so we would spend time talking so much time about, and I'm sort of probably a very joyful, happy, you know what I mean? I like the happy parts in the Millennial Reign. We spent a lot of time, what really would it look like? What does the Bible say? And I think if I could say one thing about Jeff, it always brings it back to what the Bible says. And if there's a question about anything, it's always back to the Bible. And that's really the painting the picture Scott's speaking of. Comes in the first few chapters where you're reading a lot about the environment or how things look, and some conversations, things like that. What the millennial, what it really feel like to live in that world, and at the same time have a character that's having to remember back through the times of the conflict. So in a very clever way, it presents both peaceful environment and conflict. I mean, it's very clever interweaving between the two. And just when you think it's getting really intense, because some of the tribulation scenes are very intense.
Oh man, they were
It's
hard.
like Jeff would be like, okay, it'd be really good to have a little break here. Woo, isn't it pretty,
Yeah.
or whatever. And so
no, you have to do that.
gotta-
because
kind of have to go back and forth.
The Passion of the Christ did that.
Yeah.
I mean, when you see the beating scene, do you know why they moved away with Mary Magdalene and Mary the mother, and they're walking away? Because you can't see that much
All at
torture.
once. Yes,
You
you kind of
need
have
a
to have a
reprieve.
reprieve,
Yep. A little
and then we would go back
breath
and
of fresh
forth,
air.
and I just see God, and I've seen it all along, and you just visiting, and you all get to listen in on some of this, but see how God has interwoven the relationship and the gifts between the two of you to come up with 2 books. So how did we come up with 2 books, or what is? Because I'm not sure.
Well,
Did you think we would have 2 books?
No, see, so Jeff's got book 1 over there, and this is the first and only book I ever wrote on iPad. Now that wasn't a great idea. It just helped me with that. I would, and I had to pull it apart on a computer and put it together a little bit before I even let him touch it, because it was a mess. But I remember going through, over the first nine chapters are in the Millennial Reign, then we jump back into the tribulation. And we have to kind of go a little back before that, just a hair. So it's months before the tribulation has to start, the pre-tribulation rapture, which is his son, and we see those kinds of issues inside of there. But we have to know who they are, right? And I remember, now we had already discussed for hundreds of hours until both of us were blue in the face in the very beginning of 2014, when you finally said, let's do this together. And I'm like, yeah. We had to discuss how to set it up. And then he had just kind of walk away. And because I got to write this. But I remember very clearly, I'm at a 250-page book. And I sort of calculated, and I think you'll see that here. We're at 250 pages ish, right? And I'm like, I'm only halfway through the tribulation.
We haven't gotten to part 2 yet.
And so that went in 6 months. And so, and I think to transition, I'd love if we could transition a little into book 2. This was the hardest book I've ever written in my life. Now, I mean, there's another one. There's several other books that I've written that are kind of offshooties of here. But when you're in the middle of the 5th trumpet in Revelation 9:15, he closes his eyes as soon as I say that, because he's going there.
I know what you're saying.
He's lived it, and in Revelation 9:1 through 15. Or 1 through 13, I believe it is. You have the 5th trumpet, and this is I always call it the murder-death time frame. There are these demons that show up on the planet, and they start to torture the people, and they can't die for 5 months. And it actually launched 2 or 3 books, realizing that this actually is an interesting way of talking about zombies. The zombie genre is a powerful genre that is, people, I didn't know this, but I know your kids have talked about this, and my child talked about it. So what would I do in a zombie apocalypse? Why would you care about that?
It's amazing how fascinated the next generation
They
is
have
in
been.
that.
And we've been knowing this for quite a long time frame. So I think what I was struggled with that. Some people have tried to write about that and say, well, this is where we see, death and resurrection, and they talked about it. But what Jeff and I found, and I mean, we had to argue this one out because it was hard for both of us to see it, is that we realized that when you can't die because of a fascinating curse that was released on the planet of those not sealed of God. So that could be someone that has a mark of the beast or not have a mark of the beast, either way. But they can't die. Now, let me just say it to you. If you want to die, now Pam
You
knows
should
this
say
as
that those are the ones that can be touched by these beings. They're
Correct.
the ones being
tormented to that. But Pam knows this as a nurse. If someone wants to die, she's going to figure out a way to do it. Right?
The person. You
The
mean
person.
wants to-
Yeah, the person. Not saying you,
Right.
but you're going to find a way to
Yeah.
do that. And she's seen that. My wife is a psych nurse. She's watched people in that situation. And if they're unsuccessful, they'll keep trying it. Now, what I started to see is one of the parts that I'll just kind of characterize. In this book, Nathan and there's another character in there that is they walk out to this spot in the barn and they're stumbling and bumbling all the way through the barn, and they get to a bale of hay, and they sit and look at each other, and he goes, "I'll do you and you do me," and they both have 9mm. And
This is a wonderful picture of complete, utter hopelessness.
correct.
They have no reason to live, no reason not to pull the trigger.
Right. And they both do. Now the other gentleman that is shot in the head, he's going to survive for 5 months if he's shot in the beginning of
No
it.
more death.
Because he can't die. No, that actually, you're going to see, no, we're not going to be here as the bride of Christ. But the world is going to live through a terror that can't be we can't compile it good enough. See, most people try to say that the first half of the tribulation is a peaceful time frame. Well, I beg to differ. The second seal is a World War III-ish. The fourth seal is, ugliness of a plague potential. So wait, that's pre-tribulation stuff, or the beginning of the tribulation. The second half of the tribulation is literal hell on earth. He's flipping the hell up on the planet.
Yeah.
And so that was the ugliness that I was starting to move into. And you would not have liked to be around me in the late part of 14.
Well, I remember when Jeff was even doing the plan and editing some of these sections and moving, and the Lord would just show him some of the harder pieces that's to come, and part of the things. Jeff also would be to the point where he would just be totally drained. It was some of probably the hardest days that you've walked through, because it's very sobering. So I understand that from watching Jeff.
You just think
You
it's
just-
beyond comprehension.
Yes.
I can't even fathom
What's
being
being
alive
said.
through this. And yet the human psyche, we are designed for life, and so we want to hold on to life.
Right.
And yet what the Lord's going to do through the tribulation period is, he says, I am the life, I am the way, I am the truth. And all of these things that are otherwise known for props and being trusted in will be completely removed. Matter of fact, even death be removed. And what's left but to turn to him.
No one else
By
to
the
turn.
time it's all over, they will either make
Yeah.
a decision for Christ or against him.
Well, so
Nowhere to turn.
that's a great point. So
Yeah.
why don't you answer this, because this one's a powerful question that I hear all the time when I teach my own classes. Is the tribulation just about wrath?
No.
Why isn't it just about wrath?
Absolutely. Actually, the tribulation is all about mercy. Because God could say, well, all right, at any moment in time, here's all that are in, here's all that are out, I've made the decision. But what it is...
Before the foundation of the earth, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. He knew, well, he knows every minute of every second
Correct.
where everybody stands at any moment in time. It's really us that don't know where we stand. And it's the revelation of what is going on inside of us at any moment in time. That's what trials do, is they bring up the dross.
Right.
They bring up, I didn't know that was in there. Lord,
Right.
forgive me. I repent. I turn back to you and your grace to remove that from me. Well, the tribulation when you see an entire faith-filled church disappear, the greatest awakening of all time will be the day after the rapture. Because
Correct.
all of those people that thought they were good, that thought everybody's going, I go to church, we're all going,
Yeah, I'm
right?
fine.
So I'm good by my own definition, but that's not what God's definition is. That's not what Scripture says. It's the mercy of God that says, look, you didn't know.
Yeah.
How, and first thing everyone's going to do is get right
Luke
with
12:48, right?
Exactly. They're going to find themselves as to, whoa, I didn't realize I was not doing what I was supposed to do. I wasn't believing what I was supposed to believe. And somebody told me I was good, so I thought I was good. And now they're going to make adjustments and get right with God. 144,000 Jewish evangelists will almost immediately make those. The gospel won't be something new to them. They won't just all of a sudden the rapture occurred and they'll pick up a Bible and get this. No, they'll be hearing it through things like this right now, through
Boy, and I pray
many,
that.
yeah, many ministries are ministering to the Jews right now. They're preparing them already that when that happens, their eyes will be open and they'll be revealed, and then they will take off running and not even want to get married. They'll be so on fire for God that that's all they want to do. And so you get through the first half, and that's that group of people. But then the second half becomes the more difficult to believe, and
The
that's
stubborn ones, kind
Nathan
of thing.
becomes all of a sudden a prototype of a profile, if you will, of somebody that would be so hard-hearted that how do they wind up here? Well, when you're so lost in yourself and you're so lost in your own world of gain, and now all of your dreams are possible, you're not really thinking about God. He's actually prospering through this. And there'll be a lot of people that actually prosper because of, the tribulation period. That they'll basically be totally lost and completely blind until the very, very end. And so that's what God's mercy is all about. And, the last half, it becomes horrific. I mean, it says that the Antichrist will basically be able to overpower all the saints.
And if we don't limit the days,
Yes.
you say it beautifully.
No one
Why don't you
will
just say that?
survive.
Talk to me about the limiting of the days, because
Yeah.
that's a good point.
Boy, it says if the days weren't shortened, no one would survive. And I believe that when you actually go through and you see the escalation of how bad it gets, and how it gets worse and worse and worse as it gets through this. I mean, the without death, we're still roughly about 18 months from the end.
Right.
And then as you get closer to the end, the last 30 days even more intensify. And then the very last day is the most intense of all of
Right.
them. And that's where, if it went one more day, nobody would survive.
Right.
I'm after reading and seeing all the scriptures for that one day, you recognize how bad it is that nobody would go another day.
And I think that's the PowerPoint, I think, inside of ForeTold 1 and ForeTold 2. The point that most people want to say is that I can make it by my own self. I can prep my way into the kingdom of God. And by the way, it's one fascinating verse is in Luke 12:47, where it says, they didn't do and they didn't prepare. That's the same word that we would use as prepper. Now, as a person, I've been around preppers. They believe that they can, get enough water, get enough oil, get enough food, get all this. And God, guess what God does? At the seals and the trumpets are to rip away all the water supply. Everything gets burned down. Oh, there's my shelter. Oh, wait, all my food just left. What do you think you're going to be left with? Well, you're probably going to pack up whatever you can, throw it in your back, and run off. You can't do this. The whole world is going to be stripped away. And I think, as a history buff myself, and I spent a lot of time on World War II, I want you to see the deprivation that will occur to the end. If you have to have the mark of the beast, this is a big conversation that happens right now. Because we're seeing all this stuff about, oh, we're going to put a chip in you, and oh, you can have the mark of the beast yet. And I always say, just to kind of push this out there. First off, the mark of the beast has to come because the beast has to show up first. So the mark doesn't happen until the beast shows up. He can't show up until the bride's out of the way. 2 Thessalonians 2:2-10. So don't worry. You're okay. I promise you're okay right yet. But if you're watching this in the tribulation, you already know what's happening, right? You're seeing that kind of stuff going. But here's what I would say inside of this, that Nathan actually doesn't take the mark of the beast. How is he surviving? On the mercy of God. Now, there is a powerful Netflix series that I don't even know if it's up on anymore, but it actually talks about the Holocaust. Now, most people have not seen the actual pictures. They'll do the Schindler's List and all the other ones. In there, you'll see pictures. And this was actually done by the American War Department that was sent back to the people. And this is a series of many different pictures. And you'll see guys that you couldn't make them up like. Their nose is sideways. They have been beaten and they don't look normal. Very similar to what Isaiah 52:17 says about Jesus, that he is unrecognizable, right? But what we see is I believe that these people are going to be at their end. They're going to be skin and bone. I'm 6 foot, I'm 220 pounds, way too heavy right now. Well, put me down to 92 pounds and you'd see something that doesn't look human. And unfortunately, that's exactly what happened walking out of in 1945, when the Americans and the Russians walked through those camps, and they started to see this. And one of our favorite people, you and I both have loved this, is Joe Hovine. Joe Hovine actually struggles with a point that a lot of Christians do, and you have the same attitude that Joe is, just like she reminds me of you all the way. And this sweet personality, and she goes, I just don't feel like I could rule and reign with Christ. And I said, Joe, what if your job isn't to be there with your iron fist, you're bad? What if your point is to help these people just to feed themselves? Because at the end of World War II, when we would walk into the camps, we wanted to give them food. But as a nurse, you give someone who's starving food, they'll eat themselves to death. So they had to actually lock them back up and increase the caloric intake, just minutely, until they could do that. Well, guess what we're going to see is we're going to see that kind of person in here too.
Yeah. It's powerful, and it really is thought-provoking, that's for sure. And I know one thing that we just came out of we do our One Hope weekend. And so the way I wrap all of this up is that the very last message is, well, if we're not preparing for a tribulation period, then if we're to prepare, what is it we need to do to prepare? And the answer literally is prepare our hearts.
Right.
He said, keep watch, look up. Who is your focus on? One observation I've had sitting in trade show booths going all across America is that the post-tribbers tend to have their focus on how are they going to protect their goods, their family, and everything else, preparing
a point of trust in themselves, right?
Yes, for the worst. The mid-trib, generally speaking, they're looking for preparing by where's the Antichrist?
Right.
Who is this guy? Or who's the most likely one?
What's the mark kind of thing? All
Exactly.
those conversations, right?
But literally, what God wants us to do is to focus on the author and the finisher of our faith, Jesus Christ. Stay steady, watch Him, because it says in the Matthew 25, you've got 10 virgins. 5 of those virgins have their oil. That means they got the Holy Spirit inside of them. Yeah. They are faithful to doing anything God tells them to do. And we don't even have to do it in our own strength. We do it by His strength, by His power, by His grace. his joy. People ask me all the time, how in the world could you put an entire Bible together, verse by verse, in chronological order? It's humanly impossible. I didn't. I just obeyed God. I said,
Right.
okay, what is it you want me to do? He gave me the picture, and he gave me the tools to do it, and the joy to do it. When we're doing his work, his way, his will, it's a joy.
Yeah.
Jesus said, my burden is light, my yoke is easy. When you try and do all of this stuff in your own strength, it becomes impossible. It becomes toil. It becomes, and what starts happening is you start becoming bitter at God because you're working so hard to do his thing. Well, maybe you're not. Maybe you're actually working so hard to do your thing. Is that what God really wants for you to do? And when you're doing his thing, he's giving you the joy and the strength to do it. And so that is how we prepare for the end. That's how we prepare for Jesus to come back. He's coming back for those, it says, to whom much is given. We've been given so much with the Holy Spirit, so much with his word, that when we really understand who we are in Christ, that we are empowered to hear his voice and obey him. That's really what true preparation for the end is all about.
Yeah, it's not the prepping of the material. And I think that's a powerful way of looking at this. The other thing I love about this that changed my life and the way that we spent, beating up all of these topics before we ever wrote this. We had to beat the topics up, which meant most of it was me being beat up in that way. It was fine. I was cool with that. But that's a powerful point of me. I'm okay with being beaten up because I want to be where God wants me to be. And sometimes, a football team has to do that as well. They have to, beat themselves up. Paul talks about this in Running the Race. You work yourself out, okay? And that's the workout that we're doing, but we don't understand. We're working out in the spirit, and we die to the flesh. And yet most people want to live in the flesh, and they see the flesh, and they want it to be healed and all this other stuff. And I'm like, that's great, but God's not really focused exactly on that. But I think what's also powerful about where these books can take you is a hope point. You see, I didn't have hope if I'm pre-trib. I'm like, I'm just getting out of here, and it's all escapism kind of thing. And that's one of the people that talk about the pre-wrath position. They hate about it. And yet I'm going to share with you the one reason why there is a pre-tribulation rapture. It's because of who you are. If you're the bride of Christ, Esther says that we're going to be in a wedding for 7 days. And there's a wedding feast that we're accomplishing. And we're doing that, and that is a fulfillment of a 7 days or a 7-year period of time of that. Matthew 22 makes no sense when you see a wedding feast. By the way, we're not even listed in Matthew 22, 1 through 13. Only the guests, only the people that are around it, and then the Father. The Son and the bride aren't even there in that conversation. So if you try to place yourself in there, you don't get those. Those are the reasons that are the hope. But if we have a friend, if you think about a friend or a family member they're struggling. I know you're thinking of someone right off the top of your head. I can, already know the person. You can think about some of the people you and I've talked about of me. And what I do is I say, you know what, I'm okay with, I know it's not exactly where I want them to be, but I'm okay if you come near the end of the tribulation. Because in eternity, we're all ruling and reigning in Christ. Or if you want to be Nathan and go all the way through it, that's your choice. But at least at the very end in Revelation 22, we're all unified together in the temple, in the Holy of Holies. So in the eternity of it, even if the tribulation starts, this is in 2020, if we start the tribulation tomorrow, then we have 7 years and 1,000-year period of time. That is I'm still okay if that guy is sitting at the end of that, past the white throne judgment with that. And yet that's the hope-filled point. And I think that's what I've seen. And I think you've seen that same thing when you've talked to people about that too.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting because we've used a lot of football analogies.
Yeah.
And so one thing I like to share is that so often, especially right now in the COVID-19 days, people find themselves in despair. People find themselves without hope. Conversations all of a sudden start going where they shouldn't go fairly quickly. All of a sudden, everybody is moving in the wrong direction. Everything's despair. Blame it on this, blame it on that, whatever you want to blame it on. I don't like to participate in those kind of conversations.
Yeah.
And so there's a joke for people. Obviously I've never been in the NFL.
You look exactly like that, yeah.
But there are guys that are not quite my size, but
Right.
they're close. But there's a joke in the NFL, and they, whenever you mess up real bad in training camp, they say, what the NFL stands for is not for long. In other words, if you keep messing up, it's not going. You're not going to stay in the NFL. Well, that's just remember those 3 words or 3 letters. NFL is when I see the conversation start going too far south with people, I just say, you know what, not for long.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how they'll stop and they'll go,
huh.
That's right. And you can sense that peace that falls on them. And they say, you know what? Yeah, you're right. It's not going to be for long. They may have no idea what you're talking about, but they do know it resonates for truth.
Right.
And so it's just kind of one of those things that I've always used for a great piece of, you know what, next time you get locked into the clerk and they're really nasty in the store and they're cursing and swearing and then they're saying this and that problem, just tell them not for long.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's a powerful place to look at. That's
what we're talking about.
But hope doesn't come without trust.
Yes.
I mean, I think one of the most powerful sets of there's a whole bunch of chapters I love, but Hebrews 11 starts with faith is the evidence of things hoped for and the promise of things unseen. Depends on which version you like to memorize. But what it details out is a dude named Abraham who has a vision. One of the powerful teachings that Jeff will do in his stuff, he has a vision of a time frame when the Jews would number the sand of the seashore. Now, the Jews have been, 13, 15 million at any one point in time, maybe.
Maybe 20 at the max.
Right,
if you
so
really stretch it.
so you might push it at that kind of point at any one point in time. Mm-hmm. And the world didn't show up at the first billion at around 1800-ish. Mm-hmm. So when does a billion pieces of sand happen, as we're talking about from a remnant? Mm-hmm. It doesn't happen until the Millennial Reign of Christ. So wait a second. A dude that's in what approximate time frame does Abraham live in BC?
Oh, he's right at 2000 BC.
So we're talking 4,000 years later-ish, or whatever that might be, or 5,000 years later before he sees the potential of his faith. His the evidence of things hoped for. And I think that's the powerful thing that we also need to see. If Abraham had that, sets him in the hall of faith, what are we having that hope for? And I have hope for people. I'm sitting them in this place, and I see them as maybe some of the characters in this book that are still not there in their trust point. But I say to you this way, where's your trust? Now, Jeff and Pam have had their trust ripped away on personal, professional, financial points. There's this company called Odyssey Groups that talks about your PPFs, your personal, professional, financial goals. Well, guess what? They've all been in the toilet and flushed it several times, right? I mean, you might as well just rip them up. And personally, I've been through that as well. in December of 2019, we had an issue of being on a deathbed. And I walk out 3 days later. And it was by faith that I wasn't sitting there going, oh, I'm going to be okay. I'm out of it. And so what happened to me is that when I see what the Lord can do, I'm just not fearful of this stuff. When the business has gone through its tough time, even this COVID time frame, I've not been fearful yet. It's because I trust in something way beyond where I am.
Yeah, and that's the key is when you're anchored. It says that hope is actually the anchor of our soul. And what does an anchor do? Well, an anchor keeps a boat steady when the storm is going. And it's when the storm is going, you need that anchor, and you just.
But it doesn't mean you're not going to get wet.
Oh, sure, you're still going to go through the storm.
Right.
But it's your anchor that's going to hold you steady as you're moving forward.
Right.
And that's really the key.
So ForeTold 1 and ForeTold 2, it's a continuation. It's not two separate books, really.
Right.
I mean, it's two separate books, but it's a continuation of a story that breaks kind of in the middle of a testimony and then continues on to the end of this particular testimony of this particular person's story. His name is Nathan. So if for the readers out there, maybe both of you can share this here as we're kind of wrapping up. I'll start with Jeff. What is it that you would hope or you would like to tell people about what you would hope for them should they read this story? Or what do you hope for people to understand from these stories?
Yeah, what I would believe that every reader gets is this sense of God's goodness, His mercy, and how loving He is, and how much of a future that He's given to us. When I was going through my greatest trials, the Lord would take me all the way into eternity and show me the scriptures of what eternity looked like. And then I would work my way back and I would start looking at all these scriptures of the millennial reign, 1,000 years, and think about how wonderful that was. And then I'd look at the tribulation, but then I would go, you know what? Jesus said in Luke 21:36, pray that you be able to escape all of these things. And so my belief and my hope is there, that I've been found worthy to escape all of those things. And then I would work my way back to where I was today. And then no matter what I was going through, because I had that hope anchor in the future, it always gave me and lifted me out of any situation.
Right.
No matter what kind of trial you're facing, no matter what kind of addiction you're facing, hope is the first thing that opens the door to the power of God to get you out of anything or through anything. And that's what I'm believing that this series will give to people.
Awesome.
And I think I dovetail on that little section. I think where I look at is that instead of putting that person down that might be in a different position, realize that it might take them a little longer to come along. I mean, we'll use the NFL as an example. Sometimes, a player might be near the end of his first contract, and we're not sure he really is going to take off. And sometimes he gets cut, and then he goes to another team, and he becomes a Pro Bowler. And we go, what happened to him? Well, maybe he had to come to a reality point and saying, you know what, you just can't get by your good looks, essentially. You need to put the work in with that. But the work in the Gospels isn't about what you do, but who you are. I mean, I think one of the most powerful points that when we as the church, if we listen to what Satan's talking about, the father of lies, he has nothing helpful to give me. And so if my destiny, let's say Jeff is the bride, he goes in the pre-tribulation rapture, and Pam kind of gets it a little bit later on. She's like, I'm not saying you're putting that on you, but let's say you get it a little bit later on. Oh, wow, that was a good point. And then she goes along in that mid-trip point. What if I don't catch it and I'm one of the Nathan guys, and I go through and I miss everything, but I'm in the millennial reign of Christ. You think they're going to be all upset about me? You think they're going to be mad at me? They're going to be going, man, you got it. It's okay.
Yeah.
Because we're looking
All
forward
the
in that
angels
future.
rejoice even at the one
Amen.
who's found repentant, whenever that happens.
Right, because that's Matthew 25 and 26, or 26 especially when it talks about the lost, Jesus going and getting that one lost sheep. Talking about the woman with the 10 coins, and she has to go look for that one coin in that way. God's always looking for that. And here's the thing: what if it takes in this little, scenario? What if it takes a little more for you to get there? What if it takes a little more for me to get there? I'm cool with that.
Yep, grace and mercy of God. I think that's God's plan.
Right.
To shake it up so much that you have nowhere else to look but
Right.
up. If you even have just a tiniest little space in your heart that might say yes, He's going to shake it up so much so that you have that opportunity. And so what I'm hearing you both say really is that this book is for everybody. It's for the person who is just, the world is going crazy and I need encouragement and I want to understand more about the hope. I want to understand more about prophecy. I love the Lord and I love my Bible and I want to learn more. And it's also for the people we know.
Yeah.
For our children, I would love to see young people get these because they see so many movies. It's giving them everything opposite of what the Lord says. Help them to maybe see themselves in there, like, oh, I relate with these characters and they're having to walk through some really hard times.
Yep.
So when I was reading the book, I just felt like this was a book that would push forward everybody towards the Lord. It would
Right.
make for everybody, whether you have a child who is far from the Lord or know someone far, but they just like a good book,
Right.
They just really, there's some people who just really love a good story, or someone who needs encouragement. So it's just a really interesting series, and there's nothing really out there right now like it. It's very unique.
And I think that's the whole point of this too. So to kind of wrap us up with that, you're going to see this on Jeff Swanson, theplanbible.com. That's where we really recommend that you find the book. You can order it through theplanbible.com. You'll see the little pretty pictures on that, something that Jeff worked on. So you'll see those, that you can order the first book. I remember the first person that didn't like our book, she got a little bit mad with it because we didn't have the second book out. Well, now we have the second book out, so it's all good. So you can flip over to this one and come over here, but I think that will help you. Secondly, you're subscribe to Jeff's channel, because one of the things you'll see on Jeff's YouTube channel is you're going to see points of discussions that happen all the way through the Bible, whether it's creation-based or whether it's end-time kind of area. On my channel, I have drscottyoung.com, plus we also have my own YouTube channel as well. I kind of go more on the who's. I like to spend a lot more time on the who and the why. And I think Jeff is spending more time on the what's,
Right.
in many ways. And by the way, I'm okay with different foci. I'm okay with someone that
We each got our lane.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
you're doing
Stay
your
with
lane,
those
and
lanes.
I'm doing my lane.
and so I mean, I
we're all
understand
compatible doing
creation.
that.
I understand creation issues a little, but don't ask me to teach a creation class. And that's where Jeff kind of does too. So I think as we see this, you can see on his site, we see ending in Revelation and beginning in creation. So those are other series, and we'll have more things. I have Hope in the Last Days that will help you. So if you look at either one of these, subscribe to the channels, check into those things. You'll see those things out there, and there's a bunch of resources that can really help you and give you a path to look at this. Dig in, because the only thing that happens for the three of us here is to dig in the Word. That's what hope, and that's what sustains us as like this table that will hold things up. So we just thank you for watching us and checking us out.
Yep.
Just go ahead and subscribe. Thank you so much.
Remember to share the word.